I have been married to my husband for 10 years and we have always had a very close relationship. Neither one of us are into anything kinky in our life seems to be okay, although I must admit that I often find myself engaging in a little secret self-play to satisfy my yearnings from time to time. I can't deny my Hispanic heritage and the passion is undeniable. Rick, my wonderful husband, had to go on an extended business trip the day after Thanksgiving. It was a pre-planned business trip and I had asked him to hold off on it until after Thanksgiving, which he did. I hated when Rick would go off, because I don't like sleeping alone. I have gotten so used to having my husband, that when Rick was gone, I rarely slept at all. 2 nights into his business trip and I was going crazy. I was very horny, having not gotten any since Rick had been focused on closing a huge business deal for the past 2 weeks. The thought of hooking up with some outside of our marriage horrified me, so I called a good friend of mine named Rosa and asked if she would mind being my guard and accompanying me out for a couple of drinks. Rosa and I were close friends. We had met in college. She was the wild one and I was always the one who said no to her harebrained schemes. I was surprised when she married right after we graduated and not surprised when after a year of marriage, she decided to be single again. Rosa was always telling me about her latest conquest. She pushed hard for me to join her in her adventures, but I always politely declined out of respect for Rick. Rick was gone. I was desperate and feeling lonely, so I dialed up Rosa. Finally. Rosa exclaimed, "We get to go out and have some fun." I slipped into a short cocktail dress. I had seen the dress and planned on wearing it as a surprise for Rick, but now seemed like as good a time as any to bring it out of the closet. Rosa was right on time. "Oh my God," she exclaimed upon seeing me dressed up. "Oh please," I replied as I stepped past her and onto my porch. "Let's just go snag a few drinks." Rosa and I stopped off as Fast Eddie's, a singles bar in the neighborhood, for a few drinks. "Are you looking to get lucky tonight?" Rosa whispered as we stepped up to the bar. I ignored her question. A guy sitting at the bar glanced in my direction. Our eyes only met briefly and he smiled. I hadn't experienced such a reaction in years and it was an immediate confidence booster. He offered to buy Rosa and I a drink. Free drinks. I liked that. His name was Pat. He was a handsome guy, in his late 30s to early 40s, I suspected. I stood next to him as Rosa took up an empty space to my left. "So are you from around here?" Pat asked. "Yes," I replied. "You don't come in here very much," Pat whispered. "No," I replied, "I'm not into the bar scene. My husband is away on a business trip and my friend and I thought we'd just hit the bar tonight." Pat looked past me at Rosa and smiled. She nodded her head to acknowledge his look. She then lightly tapped her hand into mine. "Behave," I whispered to Rosa. Pat was easygoing. I quickly learned he was single and a construction manager. He had 2 kids, and both were teenagers, but they lived with their mother. On my second margarita, we became Facebook friends. Things were progressing along well. Pat was easy to chat with and I found him both witty and funny. When he gingerly slipped his arm around my waist as I stood next to him, I felt totally comfortable, like I had known him as a friend for years. Pat excused himself to the men's room and asked that I hold his bar stool. I was happy to oblige. Rosa had found her way into a deep conversation with another guy who was standing next to her at the bar. Pat stepped back up to the bar. I stared to get up from the bar stool, but Pat told me, "Don't get up." "It looks fine to me," Pat said after I confided in him my fears about the dress. His reassurance was comforting. Pat leaned in and whispered, "I think your friend found someone to take home." Rosa had her back to both Pat and myself. She was leaning against a fellow wearing a cowboy hat and they were obviously enamored with each other. I agreed with Pat's assessment. Rosa was hooked. "What about you?" Pat asked. "What about me?" I asked. I was totally clueless to Pat's efforts to secure a more intimate setting and potentially a score. "Are you going home alone tonight?" Pat pressed. I had assumed I would be, but Pat's question stunned me. He obviously found me attractive. "I don't know," I replied. I couldn't believe those words spilled past my lips. In the past, my answer would have easily a straightforward yes. I had left the door open. I was married, but for some reason, Pat's easy-going character was appealing and he was very attractive. The thought of going home alone was not appealing. I had gone out to find some company and found it. Now I had to deal with a potential conflict. "I'm married," I whispered. "I know," Pat replied. I didn't know what to say. Rosa was supposed to be my bodyguard. I felt alone and ill-prepared. "I'm not asking you to leave your husband," Pat pressed. "I know," I replied. "Rosa. Turn around. Help me." "I promise," Pat whispered, "I won't cause you any problems and I am not a stalker." "But what if I want to be stalked?" I asked. Oh my God. I couldn't believe I said that. Pat smiled. "I'm not a stalker. I'm just a normal guy looking to score with a beautiful woman." At least he was honest. His honesty won me over. I gripped his hand in mine. "Just zero any night," I said, looking up into his steely blue eyes. What had I just done? Fear gripped me. Oh shoot. Pat pulled me off the bar and slipped his arm around my waist. "My place or yours?" he asked. "Yours," I replied. Oh double shoot. I was going down fast. A part of me said to back away, but then the alcohol and the neglect by Rick pushed me onward. I grabbed my clutch off the bar, as Rose turned in my direction. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Pat's going to take me home," I replied. Rosa smiled and replied, "Call me in the morning." "Maybe," I shot back with a wink. I knew what I wanted. The battle no longer raged inside of me. I wanted to be held, to have someone make me the center of their universe, to have fun, to go wild, to live like there was no tomorrow. Pat was the right person in the right place at the right moment. Rick and his business trip. I had a need. Once we reached Pat's car, a two-seater Sport Spider convertible, which had the top down, I knew there would be no turning back. A part of me felt guilty, but another part of me couldn't wait to see what this hunk of a man could bring to the table. Pat leaned me up against his two-seater and right there in the parking lot of Fast Eddie's we kissed. I had never been in a two-seater sports car and never with such a handsome-looking guy. I was 35 and felt like I was 25. John Bon Jovi screamed from the speakers. I thought about Rick for only a split second and then thought to myself, tonight I am going to do things I would have never done and I am going to get up and have fun. We pulled up in front of a huge $500,000 house just a few blocks from Fast Eddie's. "This is yours?" I asked in disbelief. "Yeah," Pat softly replied. "I have two of them. Do you want one?" "Two?" I replied, trying to hide my astonishment. "Yeah," Pat replied. "I'm selling the other one." I followed Pat up the sidewalk and stepped into a huge marble-floored foyer, that had a glass wall that overlooked a pool that overlooked the city skyline. Now this was a house. I could probably go on about the house, but I won't. Pat closed the door behind us and latched the lock. I was still standing in the middle of the foyer, looking down at the pool. "Do you want to look around?" he politely asked. He asked me if I wanted to look around at his house. We walked down a spiral marble and wrought iron set of stairs to the lower level. The water in the pool shimmered in the pool lights. "Can we go for a swim?" I asked. "Sure," Pat replied. "That's what it is for." I dove head first into the pool. The water was chilly, but I didn't really care. Pat dipped his head and I looked up at him. Neither of us said a word as our lips touched for the very first time. His kiss, soft and deliberate, was captivating. "Come with me," he softly pleaded. He led me into a door that led into a huge bedroom 00M. The walls were lighted in soft pastel colors of blue, pink and yellow. A single beam of soft white light illuminated the bed. As we walked towards the bed, a wall slid open revealing another expansive view of the cityscape before us. Can you guess what happens next? In the morning, Pat fixed breakfast for me and then he took me home. Stepping out of his spider, I thanked him for the good time. Let's stay in contact, he said. I promised I would. I looked at my phone. There were 10 text messages from Rosa. I texted her back. Details, she requested. I called Rosa. She wanted details. I told her we went for a swim. What? Rosa exclaimed. Nothing happens. No, I lied. You're a lying. Rosa shot back. Yes, I was, but I was not going to admit it. There are some things a married girl has to keep to herself. Besides, it was all Rosa's fault for not watching after me.